John Fitzgerald Kennedy, often known by his initials JFK, served as the 35th President of the United States from 1961 until his tragic assassination in 1963. He remains one of the most iconic and revered figures in American political history, remembered for his leadership during critical moments of the Cold War, his inspirational rhetoric, and his tragic, untimely death. Born on May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the second of 9 children in the politically influential Kennedy family. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., was a wealthy businessman and ambassador to the United Kingdom, and his mother, Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, came from a prominent Irish-American political family. JFK's early life was marked by privilege, but it also involved significant hardship. He was often sick as a child, suffering from numerous illnesses, including Addison's disease, which would later affect his health as an adult. Kennedy attended Harvard University, where he graduated in 1940 with a degree in international affairs. His time at Harvard was shaped by his growing interest in political affairs, which would influence his future career. Upon graduation, he wrote a senior thesis titled Why England Slept, which was later published as a book and became a success. It was during his time at Harvard that Kennedy developed a deep interest in global politics and military affairs, particularly related to the rising tensions in Europe and Asia. In 1941, Kennedy joined the U.S. Navy, where he served during World War II. His service in the Pacific Theater was marked by courage and heroism. He commanded a PT boat, PT-109, which was struck by a Japanese destroyer in 1943. Despite severe injuries, Kennedy led his crew to safety, an act of bravery that earned him the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. This experience would become a defining moment in his life and later political career. After the war, Kennedy began his political career. In 1946, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from Massachusetts. His political rise was swift, and by 1952, he was elected to the U.S. Senate. As a senator, Kennedy established a reputation for his progressive views on issues like labor rights, civil rights, and healthcare reform. His speeches and writing demonstrated a commitment to addressing the challenges of the post-war world, including the spread of communism and the need for stronger domestic policies. Kennedy's time in the Senate laid the groundwork for his presidential ambitions. In 1960, he decided to run for president. His opponent in the Democratic primary was the influential Senate Majority Leader, Lyndon B. Johnson. Kennedy's campaign for the Democratic nomination was shaped by his youth, his charm, and his vision of a new frontier for the United States, emphasizing progress, technological innovation, and strong leadership in the face of global challenges. Kennedy's most memorable moment came during the 1960 presidential election against the Republican nominee, Richard Nixon. The election was one of the closest in American history, but Kennedy's performance in the first-ever televised presidential debates proved crucial. His calm, charismatic demeanor contrasted sharply with Nixon's more disheveled appearance, and this helped sway public opinion in Kennedy's favor. Kennedy won the election with just under 50% of the popular vote, but he captured 303 electoral votes to Nixon's 219. Kennedy was inaugurated on January 20, 1961, at the age of 43, making him the youngest elected president in U.S. history. His inaugural speech was filled with the idealism that characterized his presidency, most famously with the line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Kennedy's presidency was defined by his leadership during several pivotal moments in the Cold War. One of his first major challenges came in the form of the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, an unsuccessful attempt by Cuban exiles to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist government in Cuba, which had been supported by the US government. The failure of the invasion was a significant blow to Kennedy's credibility, but he took full responsibility and rebounded by improving US foreign policy. In 1962, Kennedy faced the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US coast, threatening a direct nuclear confrontation. Kennedy responded with a naval blockade and intense diplomatic negotiations with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. After 13 tense days, the crisis was resolved with an agreement to remove the missiles from Cuba in exchange for a US promise not to invade Cuba and the secret removal of US missiles from Turkey. This event marked Kennedy's leadership at its finest and is considered one of his greatest achievements. Kennedy's domestic policies also left a significant mark. He championed civil rights, urging Congress to pass legislation ending racial segregation and ensuring voting rights for African Americans. He also pushed for economic reforms, including tax cuts and initiatives to stimulate growth, as well as new funding for space exploration. Kennedy's vision of America's future was marked by a commitment to scientific advancement, exemplified by his ambitious goal of landing a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. This goal was realized with the successful Apollo 11 mission in 1969, 6 years after Kennedy's death. On November 22, 1963, Kennedy's life was abruptly cut short when he was assassinated while riding in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas. He was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, who was riding in the motorcade, was sworn in as president on Air Force One shortly after the assassination. Kennedy's death was a shock to the nation and the world, and it sparked a period of national mourning. His presidency had been marked by the hope and optimism of a new generation, and his untimely death left a void in American politics. Despite serving less than 3 years in office, Kennedy's legacy has endured. He is remembered for his vision of a more progressive America, his inspirational leadership during the Cold War, and his commitment to civil rights and scientific exploration. His tragic death, along with the promise of what he might have achieved, continues to fuel his iconic status in American history. Kennedy's presidency, though brief, left a profound impact on the nation and on the world, shaping US politics and foreign policy for decades to come.